All right. We have new people, and so we have to let people know what we're doing. This class will alternate. That means we'll meet on alternate Thursdays until sometime in early December. And then there will be a very long break until until March, because I'm going to be going to South America, hopefully, for a long, long trip. Next week is Mysticism and Shakespeare. And we're starting a new play. We're starting the Merchant of Venice. Ooh. And these are the books if you want to take one home and start reading ahead. Now this class is one out of a series. There is an introductory, which this one is not. The introductory class I offer once every 2 or 3 years. And I just can't go over it every year and every year and every year, because which is too much for that repetition. And there's a beginning technique. No, not a spelling class. Beginning class. And then there is this class. There are a couple more beyond this yet, but first we have to finish this one.
This will be 10 years.
Somewhere like 6 or 7. In the introductory, we just talk about the signs and the houses and the planets and the aspects. It's all basic, fun, pedestrian for people right off the street. The beginning class is a technique class where you learn to use keywords and things like that to get to work with the stuff of astrology. And so you have the ability to do something. This class that we're working on now is in either 3 or 7 parts. 3 or 8 parts. Oh, no. Actually.
It's not a math class either. I am math. The students are jovial. Check them out.
The first part, which took about a year,
there she is.
the first part, which took about a year, we looked at 16 charts. Oops.
Really, I'll be quiet.
That's from cutting flowers. By the way, there are all kinds of flowers out there. Be sure that whoever wants 1 or 2 or several, take them when you leave, because by the weekend I'll have many more. And just bring the vases back, because otherwise I would be going to the poorhouse from buying flower vases. So the first part is looking at all of the broad things in the chart. We did that by profiles. We drew various different profiles, and then we cross-profiled, and we looked at all of the broad characteristics of character in the 16 charts that we're using. And in doing that, when we came to the cross-profiling, we pulled out all sorts of things that most people would never believe. Oh, here's Jack. I forgot about Jack. I gave him a call on Sunday. The next part was an estimation system. We developed an estimation system to find the relative strength of each planet to each other planet, and each aspect to each other aspect, so that we knew how influential something was and what was going to predominate over what other factor in a chart. It's a difficult, very mathematical kind of thing, but we did it with tables, and it's fairly easy. Now, if you want to catch up on all of these things, I have many, many, many tapes and a big pile of paper. So I just made new charts for the people who are new to the class for the chart that we're using tonight, and you can decide whether you want to continue on or not, or whether this is much too complicated and like that. Now, then we entered what is either the third part or the third of 5 parts. Well, it all depends on how you want to look at it. We take all 16 charts and we do an analysis of the outer personality. And then we take all 16 charts and do an analysis of the emotionality. And then we take all 16 charts and do an analysis of the mentality. And then we take all 16 charts and look into the individuality and spirituality. And then we take all 16 charts and take everything we've done all together and try to get a balanced picture of what's important, and we end up with a pretty good image of what the person is like. So we have done a number of the 16 personalities, and tonight we're working with the chart of Shirley MacLaine, and these are the fact sheets for tonight. Now, again, I'm doing this as a two-track kind of thing. I'm going to try and do it as long as I can because it's an enormous job. Each time you will get a very brief written analysis of the personality of the chart that we're working on. And what's covered in the written is different from what is covered in class. The oral part is different. It usually goes deeper, and it goes into more fun, juicy things. The written part is so that you have something that you can follow and decide if that's the way you want to approach it yourself. So these are the personality briefs for Shirley MacLaine.
We've got Jerry in the front row there.
And then I went on the net and I found a bunch of pictures of Shirley MacLaine in various different ways. And I put together a little sheet, two-sided sheet with Shirley MacLaine pictures. Now I refer to that in the written brief that I just handed out, so you want to keep both of them if you're going to go through that. All right, and as soon as everybody's got everything all passed out, we'll...
Oh, you made enough copies to go around on these stuff.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. In fact, I'm doing that for all of them now. When it's all done and we have the 4-inch thick book, we'll have pictures for each.
Oh, you should have seen, I've got this many notebooks already.
Yeah.
But I just didn't have the one I needed. Oh my goodness. Check that out.
All right. Now, the oral study of the personality is going to be, as they have been all along, incomplete. Meaning to say that there are only so many hours that I have that I can put into this, and so I can prepare only so much. It will probably be very brief, no longer than 2 hours.
45 minutes. Usually 45.
It could be long tonight. All right. When we look at the personality of Shirley MacLaine, we find that it's astrologically similar to the personality of Eleanor Roosevelt. When we look at Eleanor Roosevelt, Eleanor had Sagittarius rising and the sun in Libra, and that gave a general quality that was Jupiter-Venus quality. Now, most of the first house in the Shirley MacLaine chart, all but 1 degree of it, is Libra. And Jupiter is in the first house in Libra, and Venus, the ruler of Libra, is in Sagittarius, all of which give the whole chart a Jupiter-Venus feel about it. And that's mostly what we're going to discuss tonight. In fact, if you want to go home now, you can go home now because we're probably not hearing anything more all night. When we did a study of the chart of Eleanor Roosevelt, as a sideline to that, we did a study of affability. astrologically, what makes a person affable. Now, when we think about Shirley MacLaine, it's undeniable that with her Venus-Jupiter character, she's also affable. But that's not what we're going to study tonight. We're going to study something else. Now, she's been quite successful at a number of things. Relating to her Virgo rising, she's been a very successful writer. She has written a good number of books on several subjects. She's written several autobiographies. She's written books about China, because when she was married, her husband traveled in the Orient almost continuously, and so she spent a lot of time in the Far East. And then there are those books that she's famous for, those on pop spirituality and her quest for spiritual growth. Early in her career, she was successful primarily as a dancer. She's probably most known because of her acting, both on stage and on movies, and then sometimes in TV specials. In all of these things that she is successful, we find that she is successful as a performer and especially as an entertainer. And so we want to study entertaining or entertainment. An entertainer is somebody that is something different from somebody that's just affable. Shirley and Eleanor were affable, but Eleanor certainly was an entertainer, except in the sense that she entertained people at the White House and things like that. Both are lovable, but that certainly doesn't make Eleanor an entertainer just because she was lovable. There has to be something else or some other things that comprise the personality of someone who is an entertainer. In abstract, entertainment is ruled by the fifth house. The fifth house is the house of play and of amusement. It's also the house of vacationing and pastimes and avocations. In abstract, the fifth house is ruled by the sun, which with all of its power and its way of going about things makes everything seem simple and makes it seem like play. There's so much confidence there, and there's so much power in its being that everything is like play. The abstract solar element can be self-centered and egoistic about play and entertainment, but that's all part of it, especially in our society. Our society is caught up in an egoistic mania, a mania about entertainment. We all want and we all feel that we deserve free time. And with that free time, we want to do anything but work. We feel that we deserve doing nothing. We want to take it easy, and in that time, we demand that we be entertained. And because of these attitudes, we have made sports figures and movie and television actors fabulously wealthy, for the entertaining value that they have. However, since we like to sit around like spectators and get fat while we're being entertained, we don't always participate in the entertainment. We want to be like the sun that appears to be doing nothing, just lolling around. Because we don't accept responsibility for our participation, we get bored, because you can only just sit there and passively watch so much. And when we're bored, we become very fickle. Fans are fickle toward sports figures and toward stars, and we keep looking more and more for something more exciting than the last thing, and we have to have something more exciting to entertain us. All right, that's the ranting and raving for tonight.
Beautiful.
Yeah. Might be the downfall of our country if the United States does have Saturn in the 5th house. Now, when we look at the 5th house in the Shirley MacLaine horoscope, we're disappointed right away. There is no direct connection between the 5th house and the 1st house, which is the house of personality. For that matter, there's not even an indirect connection between the 1st house and the 5th house. We look at the MacLaine chart. There's Aquarius on the cusp of the 5th house. And that's opposite the cosmic standard. In the cosmic standard, you would have Leo on the cusp of the 5th house. And it would be like the mandala that we have on the wall here. And Leo is the standard for that. So this is just the opposite. This is very impersonal. Aquarius is an impersonal sign. That's certainly not a signature of success in entertainment, though there have been a few impersonal entertainers. Aquarius is the co-ruler, and it's in Aries. And that indicates somebody that can be impulsive and zany and have those kinds of qualities, but that doesn't necessarily indicate entertainment. Saturn...
Just a minute here.
You said something, Aquarius is the co-ruler, and that's an Aries.
Uranus is the co-ruler.
Yeah.
It's the co-ruler of Aquarius, and it's an Aries. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
It's in the notes right, but you just...
We read while you're talking.
Saturn is the other co-ruler of Aquarius, and it's actually in the 5th house in Aquarius. But that's way too somber to indicate success in entertainment. Most people don't consider like funerals entertaining places to go to. Well, some people might. I expect pretty soon they might start selling tickets for executions. Some people, we've got a very jaded society.
So is Saturn really like a co-ruler of Aquarius?
Yes.
I mean, but it's not as important as
In many cases, it's more important.
really. Why?
Yes.
I mean, I thought it was more the ruler of Capricorn.
It is a ruler of Capricorn, but it's a co-ruler of Aquarius, and if it is strong, it can be stronger than Uranus. We just did that, the last chart that we did, the chart of William Butler Yeats.
I think I missed. I was
Oh.
out of town.
Okay, we did that. There was a study on Saturn and Uranus both being strong in the chart. All right, she's obviously a sincere person, and she's sincere in an impersonal kind of way when it comes to 5th house activities, but that's not what we look for entertainment. Saturn and Uranus are sextile to each other, and that's the strongest aspect for both planets, but that isn't a very entertaining aspect either. It indicates control of the intuition and focus of intuition, which can be very helpful in spontaneous performance, but that isn't what makes up an entertaining character. So in a very brief way, we've examined the 5th house and exhausted any possibilities of this personality being an entertainer having anything to do with the 5th house. So we're forced to conclude that she does not have a classic fifth house. And that is not the source of her entertainability. So we have to look elsewhere. We have to look in a totally different part of the chart. Look at that. We're already through one page of notes and it's only 8 o'clock.
Of how many pages? 10?
No?
5 or 8. Not something they're renting.
Well, nobody brought in any ecstasy, so I can't be raving.
Would you look at the first house then?
Yes.
For that?
Yes. So just a few minutes ago when we looked at the abstract fifth house and the abstract rulership of the sun, we noted that relaxation and play are part of the essential ingredients to entertainment. Now, it doesn't seem likely that an attitude of relaxation and play are the essence of entertainment alone, but they're necessary. It's almost impossible to be entertained if you're tense. If you're not relaxed, you can't be entertained. If you're pensive, or if you're worried, or if you're glum, you can't be entertained. In my experience, the Jupiter-Venus combinations are the most relaxed and relaxing combinations in the full gamut of astrological influence. In fact, they are so relaxing they can even be careless or sloppy. At one time, quite a few years ago, I worked with a woman who had miscarriage after miscarriage after miscarriage, and it was because she couldn't carry a child to term. And it was a matter that she had Jupiter conjoined Venus in Virgo. And she did not have the abdominal tension in the muscles to be able to hold and carry the child. And so she lost it every time. Recently, I worked with the horoscope of a very young child that had Jupiter square to Venus. And one of them, I believe it was Jupiter, was in Cancer. And this child did not have sufficient tension in the diaphragm, which is ruled by Cancer. And so it was when it was sleeping, and it was even more relaxed because of sleeping, it was deprived of sufficient oxygen to the brain. So Jupiter and Venus, just from two examples like that, show you very clearly that their combinations are super relaxed. Now, those are negative examples, and they're extreme examples, but they certainly illustrate the point. Now, Saturn rules concentration, contraction, consolidation, containment. It represents an agency that is always condensing the whole wide spiritual cosmos until it's condensed down to this mineral state. Ever since there has been in astrology, the mineral state has been said to be ruled by Saturn because of its condensed and compact, opaque solidity. This means that in the cosmos, the Saturnian forces are in constant application to keep this held together. So there's an attitude about Saturn of vigilance and of tension. Jupiter is the planetary opposite of Saturn. In the cosmological sense, it is not so much expansion as an applied activity, but it's more like of a letting go, so that the universe can go back to its cosmic proportions. So when one has that wider cosmic view of things and the sense of eternity and the sense of something that carries on and on and on, there's always a positive faith and an optimism that's founded in that bigger picture. Yes, Jupiter can indicate sometimes in our life an artificial inflation, but that's not what we're looking at now. So we can see then that Jupiter, just by its almost laissez-faire way of looking at things, relaxes and lets things fill out to their full size. I seem to be going through a Jupiter period right now. Venus is relaxed and relaxing because it always seeks unity, and it never lets go of that view of unity, of being at one with something. It sacrifices anything and everything that would impede unity. It's like when you're in love with somebody, you want to be with them all the time. Boy, those bird seeds out there that are running really puts them in an odor.
Like manure.
Yeah.
I think that was sure.
No, that was. I knew that was.
Venus exists and operates in love, and love is comforting, it is soothing, and it is relaxing. So, from the vantage of love and unity, one sees things differently than when one is self-seeking. So we can see then that both from Jupiter and from Venus, there is a lot of relaxation. Libra is a Venusian sign, and Libra is the archetypal sign of looking out for the other, of compensating for them. It's also a sign of art and of culture and of refinement. It wants to bring us to a level that is suggested by that love that isn't really refined, but to us it seems like refinement. That's just its natural state, but compared to our coarse existence here, in the realm of love, where Venus focuses from, it it seems like beauty. It seems like refinement. Libra compensates and it balances for the needs of others. It doesn't even want to see things in terms of its own needs. It wants its definition through another, through a counterpart. All of these are relaxing attitudes. So when we see, as we do in this horoscope, Jupiter in Libra in the first house, that automatically indicates a relaxed personality and one that looks to put others at ease. Jupiter is generous, the most generous of all the planets, and it has an eye out to give. And the first house, personality and ascendant, are all an interface with the external world. And this is somebody that wants to give to the external world. Obviously, when somebody's wanting to give to you, it puts you at ease. For the most part, we live in an isolation. We're tensely separate. And we're often afraid to interact with others, strangers. So when somebody comes along who is charming and tasteful, and someone who's willing to give themselves to us, it puts us at ease. And when we're at ease, we're more capable of being entertained. Now things are going to get a little technical for a while. In this horoscope there is a special astrological condition that one doesn't find very often. It is called mutual reception. Mutual reception occurs when a planet like Jupiter is in a sign ruled by another planet, and that other planet is in the sign ruled by the first planet, Jupiter. So if we look at this horoscope, we find Jupiter is in Libra, which is ruled by Venus. And when we look at Venus, we find Venus is in Pisces, and Pisces is ruled by Jupiter. So there's sort of a thing that they are each in each other's sign. Now this means that the background disposition of Jupiter is Venusian, and the background disposition of Venus is Jupiterian. So this means that Jupiter is focusing Venus qualities, and Venus is focusing Jupiterian qualities. It means that Jupiter looks to Venus for the tone of its attitude, and Venus looks to Jupiter for the tone of its attitude. With this being the case, each has a very strong say in the functioning of the other, even governing some of the functioning of the other. Each is beholden to the other and dependent on the other. So there is a circular situation here. And that circular situation is something like a dog chasing its tail. Because while it's chasing its tail, it's simultaneously pulling the tail forward. So the behavior of a mutual reception is tracked. It's something like one of those trains that you see at an amusement park or something like that. It's tracked and it just loops in a constant circle. Now that sounds somewhat dismal, and sometimes it is dismal. Sometimes mutual receptions are like having a tape loop that just keeps playing the same thing over again and again and again. But it can also be a mounting spiral, something that you keep going up each time you go through the round of it. Unfortunately, sometimes it's a tailspin syndrome. Now, I'm not completely familiar with all of the intimate details of her life. I haven't spent a whole lot of time reading biographies over summer. I've read some, but not a whole lot. I hope you've all read
All of, yeah.
Yeah, did nothing else all summer.
All 16.
This is a running show.
We watched all the Shirley MacLaine movies we could. Over and over. And the books.
I thought mutual reception were more when the planets aspect each other.
We've got a long way to go yet tonight. No.
I mean, those two don't aspect each other.
We've got a long way to go.
Well, they
yet
parallel.
tonight. We're talking about that phase. And mutual reception exists whether there is an aspect or not, but please wait, we're coming.
Okay, just wanted to ask one other thing. But it would be stronger though if there was a strong aspect.
Yeah, please wait, we're coming to all of that.
Okay, that's all I have to say. I just kind of was noticed.
Yeah, okay. All right. Now, I'm not really familiar with everything in her life, but I can show you an example that is the result of something like this kind of mutual reception. It isn't only caused by mutual reception, but this kind of mutual reception would be like this. Since the first house is the house of childhood, we can take an example from childhood. Suppose two kids are playing and they're very relaxed with each other, And that relaxation allows one of the kids to do something goofy or to say something goofy or silly or something like that. And Venus in Pisces certainly is silly. It might almost even be a keyword for that combination. This silliness causes the first child to laugh. And when that first child laughs, it relaxes even more. And that acts as a stimulus to the other child to go to more silliness. And pretty soon you have two children that are mutually stimulating each other, and it usually works best with two. It doesn't seem to work so much with larger numbers. And eventually end up with two kids in a laughing jag. And one of them as much as moves a finger, and the other one starts laughing. It's that kind of situation. So it's not hard to see that this combination in Shirley MacLaine could have that kind of quality. This is a really important thing because it goes way beyond mere entertainment. Some mystics believe that via a situation like this you can laugh yourself into heaven. Meaning to say you relax and then you start laughing and you relax some more. And there are all those stories of the laughing Buddhas and all of those people that relax and let go of everything until they are in an enlightened kind of state. So it's not an unusual thing. It's not an unimportant thing. Now Libra and Pisces are probably the two most refined signs in the zodiac. They're capable of great delicacy and great refinement. The inward character of Shirley MacLaine is more earthy. But even though she took on all of that earthiness, she can handle it pretty well with delicacy. You know there's a special compatibility, a necessary compatibility between Pisces and Libra, don't you? All fish have to have scales. All right. So relaxation on the part of the entertainer is necessary to be successful as an entertainer, but there's much more to success than that. Because if it weren't so, a sleeping dog would be entertaining, because it's relaxed. You can look at it and say, wow, that's really entertaining. Entertainment requires talent, but even talent is not enough. There are many very talented individuals that are not particularly entertaining. It seems that one of the key things to be successful as an entertainer is to be entertaining and enjoying oneself. Because if you're entertaining and enjoying yourself, that radiates soul. Even if the person is doing something really serious, as a dramatic actor does, if he or she is enjoying what they're doing, it comes across as entertaining. Of course, it's easier to be entertaining if what you're doing is buoyant and cheering, but nonetheless, enjoyment is part of it. I like basketball a lot. I used to love watching that Magic Johnson play basketball because he was joyous, even when he was being very strenuous, and when he was exerting, or even when he was losing, he was still having fun. And that made it, really entertaining. You don't want to see somebody with a scowl on their face or something like that. The ascendant and the first house, as we have said all along, indicate the interface with the external world. What comes in from the external world and what goes out to the external world. Jupiter in Libra and the first indicates the ability to externalize cheer and mirth and merriment. That's what it is. It's right there. Cheer and mirth and merriment. All of those are good Venus-Jupiter keywords. So this sets the audience at ease, and it rouses their spirits. Like you feel, sometimes your lungs feel like they want to laugh. You know what I mean? You feel buoyant, almost like you've been underwater, and it just lifts you right up. With Libra in the first house, it finds itself in league with the external world. And it sees itself as a team with the audience. And hence, there is a compensatory relationship with the audience. It's sensitive to the audience, not as Neptune is sensitive, but sensitive in a larger whole. And this awareness of the audience gets telegraphed immediately to Venus through Pisces, which is ruled by Jupiter. Now the sixth house is a house of method and function and of technique. Venus in Pisces is extremely sensitive and caring. With its love for the other, it knows just how to adjust its technique to the situation. This is happening almost unconsciously with her, though I'm sure that by the time she went pretty far in life, it was a conscious thing. So this is the indication of an artistic or of an aesthetic awareness to performance or entertainment that is geared especially for the rapport with the audience. Of course, this gets reflected right back to Jupiter through Libra. Thus, she's likely to have just the right touch, and she will not let things get out of hand like it does with two kids that go on a laughing jag. This is somebody that with this mutual reception is not likely to lose an audience. She will be in touch with them all the way because to her, she's part of the audience and the audience is part of her. It's much too delicate a sensitivity. Now, without the mutual reception, Jupiter would still be married, and it would be reasonably tasteful, but it might get carried away, and in so doing it might lose its sensitivity. Without the mutual reception, Venus would still have these rare qualities of a sensitive aesthete, and she might just as well sacrifice herself for a good performance. But there might not be the introspective quality. There might be too much of an introspective quality so that she loses herself to the audience. From this we can see a preference that she stated quite a few times in life, that she would much rather perform for a live audience than do something canned like a movie or a television show. Now, a mutual reception does not require an aspect to be effective. The rulership reciprocation is effective even without an aspect. The entangled circularity is effective without an aspect. However, a mutual reception is much, much stronger if there is an aspect between the mutually receptive planets. Now, this is why I was holding up before, because in this case, it's not clear if there is an aspect. It's a matter of interpretation. Jupiter and Venus are 150 degrees apart, roughly, or about 5 signs. Now, some astrologers think that being 5 signs apart is an aspect, and other astrologers do not. For example, Claudius Ptolemy, who is the father of Western astrology, called this relationship an inconjunct, which literally means no aspect, that is, without conjunction. Some astrologers that think it is an aspect call it a quincunx, and that it has something to do with the harmony between 30 and 5, or between 3 and 5. My personal preference is to not call it an aspect, because I like to think of aspects in terms of tools. And I cannot right now, though there may be one, conceive of a quincunx tool. Now, that said, I do believe that there is an effect to this positioning if the orb of influence is small. That is, if the orb of influence is 3 degrees or less. And in this case, the relationship of Jupiter and Venus is 150 degrees plus or minus 1 degree and 36 minutes. So there's a pretty close orb of influence. Also, there is a parallel between Jupiter and Venus. They're both about the same the same number of degrees away from the celestial equator. So that adds a enhancing effect. So if there is or is not an aspect, there certainly is some connection between them. The way I normally look at 150-degree relationships is as implied aspect patterns. A manifest aspect pattern would have 2 planets aspecting a 3rd planet, and those 2 planets may or may not aspect each other. All right, we'll come to that in just a second. Now, what are manifest aspect patterns? A grand trine, where you have 3 planets in 3 positions, that's an aspect pattern. That's more than just an aspect. Or, if you have a T-square, that's an aspect pattern. Or, if you have a 30, 60, 90 triangle, where there's a sextile, a trine, and an opposition. That's an aspect pattern. It's manifest. A grand square is an aspect pattern. Now, those are complete. These are geometric aspect patterns. There are other aspect patterns that do not produce a geometric figure. And let's look at some of them. This is a sextile square aspect pattern. C is square to B, B is sextile to A, but there is no aspect between A and C. It's a pattern, but it's manifest. There's something at all 3 points. You could take A, and you could put it either here or here, A and A prime. There would still be a sextile, and the square. B and C would still be square to each other, and either A and B would be sextile or A and C would be sextile. Those are examples of aspect patterns where there is not a geometric figure and where the planet is either internal or external, as in the case of A double prime on that example. So those are examples of aspect patterns that are non-geometric. Now, if we take a situation like we have in the Shirley-MacLaine chart, we have Jupiter in the first house, and we have Venus in the sixth house. Now that is 150 degrees. Now 150 degrees can be a sextile square, such that Jupiter is square to a different planet, or Venus is square to a different planet. If you sextile here and a square here, or sextile here and a square there. But if there's no planet in either of these two potential points between Jupiter and Venus, it is an implied aspect pattern. And what you have in effect is like what it would be if there were a planet there, only there isn't a planet occupying it, so it's sort of suspended, and it's sort of like an image that is out of focus, and it, like you're adjusting the lens of something, and you just haven't set it into place yet. And that is what the implied aspect pattern is like. All right, I'm getting a little bit closer. This is a very technical night tonight.
Did you say something that she's more introspective because of the mutual reception?
No, if there weren't the mutual reception, she would be more introspective and she'd lose control of the audience by turning inward more with the Venus in Pisces. I corrected myself there as I was speaking. Jupiter would, without the mutual reception, Jupiter would be more likely to get balmy and lose the audience by going overboard. Without the mutual reception, there is the possibility that she would lose the audience by getting into the Piscean introspection in the sixth house and thinking about all of her technique and not giving out and going back and forth. All right.
What about Pluto in that?
We're way ahead again. You guys think way too fast here. I'm slow, so you've got to give me a chance. All right, let's first look at the inconjunct as an implied aspect pattern. Now, one of the ways you can do that is to lay the aspect on the cosmic mandala. Where the signs in the houses are lined up, it tells you something about the nature of the cosmos. Such that if the first planet is at the cusp of the first house in the cosmic inconjunct, the other planet would be either at the cusp of the sixth house or at the cusp of the eighth house. And that would be one of the cosmic standard. Now, if you put planet A and the first house in Aries, then let's look at the place where B is either at the sixth house or at the eighth house. Now, when we do this, this looks awfully similar to what we have. We have Jupiter in the first house and Venus in the sixth house, which is something of a classic Mandalic relationship. So, it's the relationship of the first to the sixth, or of Aries to Virgo. On the mandala, it would be the relationship of Mars ruling Aries abstractly and Mercury ruling Virgo abstractly. With the first house, what happens is we set out to do something. and we spring forth with Aries-like energy. We're something like the shoots that come out of the ground in spring and are undefined. The weeds and the things that you planted look pretty much the same when they're just a shoot coming out of the ground. Then with Taurus in the second house, one picks up materials and needs and all of those things. With Gemini in the third house, one develops the rudimentary skills and beginnings to work on something. And you come to the fourth house in Cancer, and what happens then is a period of incubation and imagination. And then when you come to the fifth house, there's expression. What you wanted to do is externalized. It's been brought out to the world. But when it comes to the sixth house, the critics get it. And the critics, even though they're not creative people, certainly can find all the flaws. And they can see how it could be better. So then first expressions are in such a place that there is fixing or healing that has to be done. But in life, that fixing or healing has to be done on the fly. You can't stop life and fix because you've got to keep on living. The first house, as we've been saying all night, represents the physical body, which is our interface. We, the spirits, interface with the external world through the physical body. And so the sixth house is the use and function of the physical body, but it represents its need for maintenance and repair and for improvement. Now, it's an interesting thing. At one time, there used to be a 10-sign zodiac. And when there was a 10-sign zodiac, there was one sign that ran all the way from Virgo to Scorpio. You can still find it in some very ancient Egyptian zodiacs. It was produces of Mercury. You know, it produces the Mercury is the doctor symbol with the ball with the wings on it, and then the two serpents wrapped around back and forth. And so that's the symbol of healing and the ultimate healing, which is death. And so that relationship of the 2 points that can be in conjunct relative to the ascendant to the first house is indicated built right into the structure of the zodiac itself. So when we apply this to our pattern that we have right here of Jupiter and Venus, we see that we have everything that was implied earlier, everything that was mentioned earlier. But it's all magnified. It's magnified because there is a specific connection through an implied pattern. So there's a distinct tendency of a behavior pattern, even if it isn't an outright tool. It's fairly well defined, which means that everything that we've said so far about the mutual reception is much, much stronger. Now, when we say these things, we have to be very careful about what we're doing because we can get too literalistic about that. With Venus in conjunct relationship with Jupiter and ruling the ascendant in the sixth house representing technique, you could get the notion that she was something like a method actor or a method actress. Now that would be carrying it too far. Now she's sensitive to method and technique, but to go so far as to say that she was a method actress was too much, would be saying too much. She has a definite way with an audience, and she has a talent at performance vis-a-vis with the audience, but the way that she does it, her modus operandi, is not set. She's capable of adjusting. If there were a more set thing like fixed signs or heavier planets, that's where you would expect something like a method actor who had a rigid, they'd get into their self and they would bring the audience into them, having their set way of doing anger or their set way of doing something. Hers is a much more interactive than that. It's a much more fluent kind of way of going about it.
Isn't the inconjunct kind of indefinite too, and sort of like, it's sort of hard to be real clear and focused? I mean, just the
No.
inconjunct in itself,
No.
what is the meaning of inconjunct?
We're coming up to that, yeah.
Okay.
A little bit more.
It sounds like a definite maybe, but I have a question about
Yes,
that pattern.
Yes.
Now, if could you have a pattern on the upside of
yes.
that?
Everybody's,
Oh.
yes.
Sorry.
This is an eager group. This must be something of anticipation in the air tonight. All right, let's do that very thing. All right, we have Jupiter and Venus. We have 4 places where there could be an aspect between that tie these two together. P1, P2, P3, P4. All right. If it was P1, Jupiter would be sextile to that planet, and that planet would be square to Venus, and there would be, and the inconjunct relationship would be tied together even stronger. If it's P2, Jupiter would be square to P2, and Venus would be sextile to it. And that would be another way that they would be tied together. If it's P3, Venus would be squared to P3, which would be trine to Jupiter. And if it's P4, Venus would be trine to P4, which would be squared to Jupiter. Everybody gets all of that. This would be in approximately 17 Sagittarius. This would be 17 Capricorn. These would be in the opposite signs. It would be 17 Gemini or 17 Cancer. Okay, we look at P1, P2, P3, we don't have anything there. But if we look at P4, we do find Pluto at 22 of Cancer. Now, since we're dealing with a trine and a square, we are allowed to have up to a 6-degree arc. And this is within a 6-degree arc. So we do have an aspect that is, in effect, making the inconjunct more strong because a third outside planet aspects both of them, and it brings that into focus. So we have an inconjunct pattern that has a manifest aspect with it. And the inconjunct is a very close orb. And this changes things significantly. It doesn't change anything we've said about the relationship between Jupiter and Venus. That remains the same, except that it's probably even a little bit more strong. The change is, like Susan, oh my goodness.
I was sitting up for a while, but
Oh, I didn't say that.
she had her kind
Let's see, these are leftover too? Now the change that comes about is that the mutual reception has an influence beyond just the first and the sixth house. And it has an interaction that goes beyond just interactions with the audience. Now this is a very difficult, when we add this fourth point, we take all the other ones out in between now. When we add this fourth point of Pluto to the combination, it makes it a very complicated pattern and a very difficult thing to judge. Not easy to get that. So let's try and do that just a little bit, because by this point I'm running low on time in the notes and I sort of breezed over this very fast. The major aspects, the square and the trine, would normally be dominant, but they're weak. The aspect pattern, which would normally be minor, is strong and refined, and it's reinforced by mutual reception. So we have to hold all of those facts in our mind. And let's look a little bit now at the square and at the trine, and then try to put it all together. Let's look first at the square of Jupiter and Pluto, which is the weakest member. Jupiter-Pluto aspects, no matter what ilk of aspect it is an aspect that is about power and greatness. Jupiter and Pluto both do things in a grand style. They do everything really big. When there are squares between Jupiter and Pluto, there are almost always struggles. The 1st and 10th house are positions that indicate struggles between personal values and preferences squared off against powers in high places. Jupiter in Libra in the 1st is, as we have seen, is bright and positive and outgoing. Pluto in Cancer in the 10th is dark and conservative and protective of professional interests and even of societal image. Jupiter is high-minded and principled. Pluto is coldly, almost rapaciously indifferent. It does what it wants and it gets what it gets. Now in the trines and sextiles between Jupiter and Pluto, it's almost always an indication of somebody who's a force for the good. That just by their very being, they are a force for the good. But when there is an affliction between them, it indicates moral struggle. How to talk about this? Well, in her life, she played some roles which, if they were not handled carefully, could have been seen as sordid or seedy or even vulgar. In her life, she interacted with some powerful underworld-supported characters, such as Frank Sinatra and people like that, people who had great powers. However, in all of these cases, and in her life in general, she came out by remaining quite positive. And she did it by sustaining a cheery, loving positivity. It was only in recent years, now that her career in big-time entertainment is over, that she's been talking about her relationship with corporate entertainment. And it has not been nice what she has had to say. So what we're looking at is, in fact, what she had to deal with. Let's look a little bit at the the Venus-Pluto aspects. Venus-Pluto aspects usually have to do with love fixations. When we say love fixations, I don't mean that pejoratively. Venus loves, and Venus in Pisces loves sacrificially. Pluto always has something of an eternal quality about it. It is an ever-present potential or threat. Like the Godfather always works indirectly and by influence. She no doubt knew and was elevated by people who had power and influence. Now the sixth house, as we have just mentioned, has to do with skill and technique. In this case, especially with the relationship of Venus to the very steady Pluto, it has to do with practice. As a child and in her youth, she practiced almost incessantly at dancing and drama both. The 10th house indicates goals and objectives. Now, since this trine is a watery sign trine, it has something to do with feeling. She's not somebody that mentally objectifies her goals or objectives. She feels them. But you can operate just as well that way as if you visualize them or if you mentally calculate them. If you have a dead reckoning that's based on feeling and you don't budge in your feelings, you attain your objectives. And this is precisely what she did. So there is in this combination then a case of persistent love or loving persistently and enduring and getting its way no matter what the sacrifices involved. Now, because of the dispositions and interactions of Venus and Jupiter are what they are, she did not make moral compromises. Now, the trine is significantly stronger. If you look on your fact sheet, it's almost twice as strong when you look at percentages as the square. It means that sacrificial love is going to win out. It's almost always going to overcome the tendency to be compromised, and love is going to win out in the power struggles. Yes.
The fact now, I have been listening to your explanation of the power in that on that. Now, just the fact that Pluto deals with power
Yes.
in its aspects, with whatever it deals with, the fact that it is in aspect to the quote-unquote non-aspect or inconjunct,
Yeah.
it makes the effects of the inconjunct stronger,
Yes.
correct?
That's correct.
Okay.
Yeah. That's what we're trying to get at. It is, these are minor dramas which she solves. This is what we're trying to get to. These are minor dramas. The tendency to be asked to be morally compromising and to have struggles with people in power, and the ability to obsess on an objective with love, they're minor dramas. And they bring into focus the inconjunct, which solves everything by maintaining this positive, entertaining way. Now, this is very unusual. This is not something you find all the time, because the inconjunct would usually be the subsidiary thing, and it would not be of the greater influence that the sextile and the trine, that the square and the trine would be. But because of the orbs and because of the mutual reception, it shows the dynamic of what life is like. All right.
So you mean that the inconjunct is almost twice as strong as the square?
The trine is twice as strong as the square. The inconjunct is very hard to calculate.
How do you figure the trine being twice as strong?
Because it's percent by percentage. The percentage of the Pluto square is 1%, or it's actually more than twice. And it's 6% for the Venus trine Pluto. There's a much closer orb between the Venus trine Pluto than the Venus the Jupiter square Plutos. For the new people, you may feel a little bit lost in this, but you'll catch on to the idea right away as time goes on.
The Venus trying Pluto is about 5-degree orb, isn't it?
Yes, but it's still not a strong aspect.
What?
It's still not a strong
Yeah, I
aspect.
know, and the other is about a 6-degree orb. That's why I was wondering
Yes.
how you got it to be places.
We will have to go back and look at the sheets. I got the sheets
Oh, you
right
mean
here.
just the strength of the planet,
Yes.
blah, blah, blah. all
Yes,
that
yes.
stuff,
Yada, yada, yada.
You remember the 17-step program.
I think I've been blah, blah, blah in this place. All right, I think we've said enough about this whole pattern. Let's go on to a few other little things.
What about Mercury?
Well, Mercury's. All right.
Part of the
He's
pattern.
going to throw an eraser.
Okay, the first house indicates childhood as well as personality. In fact, a lot of psychologists think that personality is formed by childhood. And even though her father was a drama coach, which is indicated by Virgo rising, her first love was really dancing. From my experience, I find that in people who take dance as a performing art, 3 signs are most frequently associated with dance. Libra, for the balance, the grace, and the elegance. Capricorn, for the exactness and the timing and the footwork. In fact, especially ballerinas. For a long time, I looked at a lot of charts of ballerinas, and Capricorn was always prominent in them. And finally, Pisces, for its mystic joy of movement and its imagination that gets put into its feet. Now, the reason why why dance is an ideal form for her is by the very nature of the person. In this horoscope, Saturn and Pluto are not strong planets. So this is not a character that gives itself to restraint or to limits or to limitation. Jupiter, however, situated as it is, gives some reasonable possibility of exaggeration or loss of proportion or self-indulgence or something like that. The body itself, the person, is our experience of limitation. We can't do with our bodies what we do with our emotions or with our imaginations or with our minds. We can't do that with the body. The body tires and it has limitations. You only do so much. So in learning to dance, she experiences the effect of limitation without having to go through the heavy, hard discipline of limitation. And so she can enjoy herself and get the effect of it at the same time. This is something that is really, really important for somebody like this. Dancing also shows another side of what we've been speaking about, entertainment and performance. If one begins with dance, you realize right from the onset, it's a matter of doing. You know you can dance by sitting there and drawing or something. You've got to put yourself into it. And the cardinal sign, Libra, being on the ascendant, indicates that this personality thrives in active doing. However, if somebody is dancing, one is very much involved with dance and can lose the rapport with the audience that we've been talking about so much. That's very important to the Libra personality. But in dance, there is a compensation. You don't have to have the interaction with the audience, because if you sacrifice that, you have the interaction with the music. When you're dancing, there is the back and forth with the music, and you make love to the music itself. All right. When we studied the personality of Isadora Duncan, we saw that she had Aries rising. And we also said that with the Sun in Gemini, that she was very much a communicator. In fact, her entire dance method was based on a dance interpretation of a grammar book. She was sensitive and she was aesthetic because she had Venus in the first house and Neptune in the first house. However, there was something with the Aries rising about her that was very brash. And her dance was all about her. And it was all about her interpretation. So when we come here, we find that Libra is in the first house, most of the first house, all but 1 degree of it. And for her, it's not all about her, it's about sharing. So it's not so much a matter of having something for you to say as a particular individual, but in the sharing. This is why she is so popular. Because if she would be more of a cult figure and have a smaller audience if it was what she had to say herself rather than just wanting to share the joy of dancing. In her dancing, she was not a big interpreter. So she was not without interpretation, but she was mostly a performer and an entertainer. And so this again suits her personality. Now there's another thing about this that you can see about the aspect pattern that works in this, and that is all dance, the way you work out a dance is called a routine. And so she was a perfect routine dancer. Like, she was in Broadway shows, in a chorus line and all of that, and she had to work with the routine. And she wouldn't, she's not somebody that would have to make her statement by being individualistic to the detriment of artistic performance, but because she could get into the routine and enjoy the routine is where she had her strength.
And where does routine come from?
The relationship between the first and the sixth house, the whole conjunct, the sixth house itself.
Okay.
Yeah. We're just picking up the odds and ends and tying them in now.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. We were just about gone as far as we're going to go tonight, even though Mike was going to jump up and down and say, "What about Mercury?"
19%.
Stay tuned for next.
But when you look at things like this, like the relationship of discipline to dance and limitation to dance, and when you look at the way routines work into her life, it's just a marvelous thing. Like when you can look at horoscope after horoscope and every little thing of life, and you can see that our lives, if we're living true to ourselves and in harmony with our characters, we're working out with the horoscope, we're right in harmony with the cosmos. It just never ceases to be a wonder to me. As usual, I ran out of time, and I get into a dilemma because I don't want to spend more than one session on something like the personality, because that would be just way too much. Let's look at one more little thing and then close with that. It's a big thing in her life. As the years have gone on in her life, she has been less involved in things of entertainment and performance. There are not many people that are into dance performance at age 70. But as time has gone out, she has become an outspoken and active liberal in every sense of the word. She's liberal in the sense of the word such as we use it in a statement like, he liberally applied butter to his bread. She does everything with she does everything with that kind of liberal generosity. All of the planets have all kinds of different sides to them. Jupiter does sometimes have a stern orthodoxy about it, but it's almost always generous. And so Jupiter is very often the very soul of liberality. Liberal with its care for others is, and not for personal initiative, is extremely liberal. It thinks about the general good and not the individual good. Jupiter, in liberal with its elegance and its merciful beneficence, is the perfect example of liberality. The sixth house indicates a willingness to act and serve for liberal causes and not just give lip service. An activity for which she has won several awards in recent years. Yeah, she's one of those California celebrity liberals on the political scene, but she's much more than that. She's liberal in a very positive way. It's not scientific, and it's not a sound thing to do to assign political predispositions to the signs of the zodiac or to the planets. It just doesn't work. But every time I've tried to do it, I've been confounded around the next corner. Political bias is a one-sided imbalance or deficiency that seems to be in a different and almost orthogonal dimension from astrology. So that astrology and politics don't jibe very well. If someone has a political disposition, you can see how it works out through the horoscope, but you can't say from the horoscope that they're necessarily going to have this and such disposition. But after all of those qualifications, it certainly looks like a liberality that's born of generosity, and that this is somebody that's almost born to be liberal. Now, everything we've done tonight is very, very incomplete. We have not done anything with the strongest aspect that focuses into the first house. We have not done anything with the strongest planet in the horoscope that is the ruler of the ascendant, which is why Michael is jumping up and down. Now, in the written part, more is done with the Mercury and Jupiter. That's why what I can not do in one, I can do in the other. But it is still very, very incomplete. Now, we will come to that planet and that aspect and how it reflects into the personality when we do the mentality study a couple of years from now. We will do that. But until then, the omission is an excellent opportunity for all of you to do something on your own. And you can bring your results to me and I'll comment on them. I wasn't correct with a red pencil or anything like that.
Blue.
But if you want to bring...
What are we supposed to do in the room?
I'll look at how Mercury focuses into the personality, the outer personality in this person, most notably through the opposition of Mercury and Jupiter, and how it fits into the in conjunct pattern that we've looked at, as well as the manifest pattern, including the square and trine. That's all I got tonight.
Thanks. It'll be a whole lot more complete than my notes.
Yeah, thanks for...